It was during July and August when police encountered a seemingly endless list of car thefts and high-speed chases involving top-of-the-range cars. In all, more than $1.25 million worth of Jags, Hondas and Porsches were stolen.
A Type 964 Generation 911 Turbo goes missing in Los Angeles. It is then bought for $10,000 in cash on the black market. An advertisement in the Sydney newspaper for a used Porsche appears. A shipping container leaves the port of Los Angeles headed for Sydney, and a customs agent in Sydney declares the container legitimate. And the parts are distributed throughout Australia's Porsche dealer network and even ending up in the Middle East for 10 times the original purchase price. And the cycle repeats. This was the lucrative method of operation for a clever 26-year-old mechanical engineering student dropout termed crime boss named Steven Spiliviero, who had an insatiable appetite for the unmistakable silhouette of Porsche's creme de la creme, the 911 Turbo. Since the launch of the Type 930 911 Turbo in 1974, the turbos have been the most intensely engineered, the most technologically marvelous, and also the most expensive 911s of the generations. And in the early 90s, the 911 Turbo was the most sought-after car in the depths of crime syndicates. At the forefront of providing these German-engineered machines to the Australian underworld and being uncatchable by police behind the wheel of a turbo was a young 16-year-old Australian kid given the nickname by police, the Porsche Kid. This is the story of how Porsche's flagship model became the Hellcat of its time, not if it would be stolen, but when. The year is 1986. Porsche as a company consisted of hardcore enthusiasts, techno-elitists, and wannabe race car drivers, all with the goal of creating a car that excelled at every discipline other than price point. The current 911 structurally was 2 decades old with minimal evolution and refresh, slowly becoming a relic of the past, but still loved by the masses. And a young Filipino artist working for Porsche by the name of Benjamin Dempson would put pen to paper and design the next generation of 911. One that would perfectly intermingle old world design, but with modern interpretation and electronics derived from the Group B 959. This new Type 964 911 would retain the horizontally opposed rear-mounted air-cooled flat 6 configuration, but now with a larger 3.6-liter displacement by the moniker M64. The compression ratio was a stout 11:1, and a forged and balanced crankshaft gave the M64 excellent power production for a naturally aspirated engine, only being 10 horsepower less than the early Type 930 Turbo 3.0 models, but without the deadly turbo lag synonymous with those Widowmaker models.
Acceleration. The 911 Carrera 4 is quicker than any production Porsche we've ever driven. Our test car covered a quarter mile in 13.3 seconds with a final speed of 104 miles per hour.
The modernization stretched further than just the engine. Lessons learned on the ethereal Porsche 959's PSK all-wheel drive system were trickled down to the 964. This new full-time all-wheel drive system employed 3 differentials plus an electronically controlled hydraulic clutch that sent 31% of the torque to the front axle and 69% to the rear.
A 0 to 60 time of 4.5 seconds puts the Carrera 4 ahead of many American V8 performance cars.
This gave the 964 Carrera 4 a brisk acceleration to 100 kilometers an hour, exceptional handling in all conditions, and overbuilt for the 310 Newton meters of torque the M64 could produce. The front suspension was now McPherson struts versus torsion arms of the classic models. The bumpers and fog lamps were integrated for better aerodynamics combined with the electronic rear spoiler. And the much anticipated wide-body turbo model used the rear-wheel drive configuration of the Carrera 2, but with the older, proven power plant of the Type 930, the 3.3-liter single turbocharged M30 engine, but with a larger intercooler and more power as a result.
But the 911 Turbo can still pin you to your seat. Don't blink or you'll miss the 0 to 60 run. It's over in 4.8 seconds. 911's quarter mile takes 13.1 seconds with a final speed of 109 miles per hour.
The silhouette was instantly recognizable, but the performance was that of the modern age, and as a result, the rich and wealthy just had to have them. But in a small, affluent community 40 miles outside of Los Angeles, California, Newport Beach, which was densely populated with Porsche 911s, they were slowly going missing, and police were essentially dumbfounded. They weren't stolen from home garages or dealership showrooms, but rather in parking lots in the fashion district in broad daylight. And an engineering student dropout with mechanical chops by the name of Steven Spiliviero was at the center of the racket. His second-hand furniture removal truck purchased for $10,000 US with the writing Prestige Car Transport in big letters down the side was the last thing a Porsche 964 would see before being ramped into its sound-deadened box, and within hours it would be dismantled into pieces stretching across a warehouse floor and then into a shipping cargo container with a destination, Sydney, Australia. Simultaneously, newspaper ads of Porsche 911 parts and whole examples at drastic discounts would show up in Sydney newspapers, and even grabbing the attention of Porsche Cars Australia, who put notices in the newspaper of shady grey market imports. According to Spiliviero, so many 911 parts and left to right hand converted models flooded the Australian market that prices overall dropped by over 40% in the used market. It was such a huge issue that Porsche as a company refused to sell private party individuals the parts required to carry out the steering conversion for Australian compliance. Container after container would arrive at Australian ports. Once the import duty was paid, there wasn't any probe into the legitimacy of parts, or the car as a whole, and they were distributed across Australia's Porsche workshops and even to the Middle East. Missing Porsches weren't just happening in the United States. In Australia, they were highly sought after by turbo kids. These were youth with a knack for car theft, who regularly stole high-performance turbocharged RX-7s, Nissan Pulsars, BMWs, and their specialty was the turbo 911s. One 16-year-old kid in particular was engulfed in folklore, taking $1.2 million worth of Porsches and luxury cars on high-speed chases and making a name for himself as being literally uncatchable, and Sydney police knew him as simply the Porsche Kid. Brett Lindsay Capper made a career of taking 911s, both 964s and classic models from their respective owners, and taunting the police doing 200 kilometers an hour through neighborhoods. On an early Sunday morning in Drummoyne, a suburb in the inner west of Sydney, the infamous Porsche Kid and his friends would grab a Porsche 959 from an exotic dealership. The 959 was unlike any Porsche Turbo that came before it. The sequential twin-turbo 2.8-liter flat six was derived from Porsche's racing efforts with the 956 and 962 programs to curtail the laggy nature of 80s turbo technology. The PSK all-wheel drive system was more at home in sanctioned Group B rallying than roads used to commute to work, and with a price tag of 350,000 Australian dollars, it was the holiest of holies in regards to street-legal Porsches, and a 16-year-old kid was now behind the wheel. By the time the police responded to the break-in, the Porsche Kid was gone with the Group B homologation special.
By the time Brett Lindsay Capper turned 18, he'd already notched up an extensive criminal record, and just after his 18th birthday, Capper embarked on a car theft spree, stealing 5 cars.
It was during July and August when police encountered a seemingly endless list of car thefts and high-speed chases involving top-of-the-range cars. In all, more than $1.25 million worth of Jags, Hondas and Porsches were stolen.
New South Wales police, in the wake of the missing Porsches, would form a special task force, codenamed Operation Cabriolet, and it would unravel a scheme stretching from the United States, the Middle East, Europe, and Australia. Millions of dollars worth of Porsche parts and whole examples, old and new, were linked to Spiliviero's warehouse operations in Newport Beach after his business associate ratted him out, subsequently having him raided by Newport Beach police and arrested, and not surprising, while behind the wheel of a 911 reconstructed with stolen parts. The Porsche Kid would create an even longer rap sheet of crimes, from stealing Ferraris and Commodores to armed robberies, ultimately leading to spending the rest of his days in and out of prison. The 911 had an image akin to the WRX and Lancer Evolution and even the Cosworth Ford Escorts. It was a thief magnet with an exorbitant price tag that, with a recession overhead and newly introduced luxury tax for 1990, it wasn't worth the hassle of wondering if it would still be there after a night on the town. Porsche Cars of Australia saw their sales decline drastically from 600 plus cars sold per year in the mid-80s to only 101 cars sold in 1991, which folded the Hamilton family ownership of the prestige dealer since 1951 back to direct German Porsche AG ownership from Stuttgart. While Porsche blamed the economy and wanting to directly serve the needs of its customers better, the flood of bargain 911s with questionable history being advertised boldly in newspapers and headlines of ram raids involving 911s didn't help their bottom line. The economic downturn didn't just affect dealers, but the 964 range of 911s themselves. A proposed 969 model, which would have been the 964's take on the legendary Group B 959, but with an IndyCar-derived V8 engine, was proposed, and even a test mule built with an Audi V8 in the rear. But money dried up, and the pricing wouldn't favor sales, and all the prototypes but one was crushed, and the 969 was replaced in favor for the 3.6-liter turbo, famously used in the Bad Boys movie, sitting on those 3-piece Speedline forged wheels. The short lifespan of the 964 was embroiled in headlines, many positive and some negative, but it marked a key turning point for Porsche as a whole, embracing subtle change and modernity, but keeping the overall essence of the 911 still intact. At a point in time, the 964 was the bargain 911. In the late 2000s, the Carrera 4s could be purchased for as little as $15,000 in decent condition. That would quickly change as designers would eloquently and sometimes not so eloquently modify 964s into pieces of rolling art. Singer Vehicle Design would take these not so desirable 964s and redesign them in carbon fiber, pitting Cosworth tuned engines in the rear and updating the interior and cosmetics, and a price tag north of $500,000. Akira Nakai and his company RWB would create a cult-like following as he took hand tools and aggressively widened and stanced 964s with body kits and aero, using a less precise but still impressive method of operation to transform the 911 silhouette. In today's market, the 964 is just as desirable as any other generation, with 7-figure examples selling on Bring a Trailer. Nonetheless, the 964 over the course of 5 years has made such an impact in both the mainstream popular culture and the criminal underworld, it's everything you'd expect from every 911 that came before and after it.